A woman exclaimed, "I lost my wallet," with a panicked expression. I offered to buy her dinner, but she clutched the hem of my shirt and looked up at me, asking me a ridiculous question. "Can I stay at your place tonight?" I was unable to turn her away with those teary eyes. I'm 28-year-old Charles Smith. I was moved from the well-respected sales department to the planning department 2 years ago. Charles, did you finish the proposal I gave you yesterday at 9:00 a.m.? Mike smirked as he shouted out to me at the beginning of work, "It is finished." I looked up from my desk and said, "Check it out. I've already sent it to your PC." Mike frowned instead, then smirked. "What? As soon as you're done, you should report to me. How long have you been employed? And keep in mind that I'm your senior in this area, so speak politely," Mike said bitterly. "You're such an unappreciative junior, really. I'm willing to provide you work even though you were demoted from sales. Giving you assignments is difficult. Even a high school graduate could complete them," he added in a raised voice, hardly smiling. His temples pulsed and his mouth twitched. His facial muscles are really expressive. "Yes, I just had a high school degree when I started working here, but you had a college degree. Mike, even though we are the same age, who is the senior in this organization? Don't you adore hierarchy? You always say something intelligent. The new employees will quickly take over your task when they arrive." Mike sat down at his desk, red-faced, and began typing frantically on his keyboard after finally raising his voice. I didn't want to drag out the dispute, so I thought, I'll return that exact line to you someday. I didn't share my final opinion. Mike has been targeting me ever since I was moved from the sales department to the planning department 2 years ago. The company's star department is sales. Therefore, I feel like I was degraded when I was transferred to planning. Given Mike's degree from a renowned university, it appears that his pride was wounded by my presence in the prominent sales department, despite the fact that I just had a high school graduation. He frequently makes sarcastic comments or dumps hectic stuff on me. He does show me a lot of love, but he doesn't appreciate how I complete duties swiftly and easily sidestep his insults. Our daily schedule has just modified. New hires will be allocated to each department as of right now. We have 3 new people joining our planning department this year. The 3 new hires gave their introductions during the morning meeting, which began with the manager's greeting. James, the lone male new employee. Jennifer, a stylish woman. And Margaret, a woman with thick spectacles and a ponytail. Margaret was the first to have that typical freshness of new hires. On the other hand, she was the last to greet us. "I'm Margaret Williams. Nice to meet you." Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming through thick glass, just like her glasses. "Well, I'll leave the rest to each OGT supervisor." The manager cleared the slightly gloomy air after Margaret's greeting with a cough, handing off the new hires to their respective trainers. Since I'm not assigned to train anyone, I went back to my desk and started working. "Charles, you're in charge of training from tomorrow." I've informed the higher-ups. Later that evening, Mike suddenly said this to me. "What?" "It's about Margaret. This is Charles. He'll be your trainer from tomorrow." "Don't worry, he's senior to me." With a smile, Mike patted my shoulder and returned to his desk. He probably told the higher-ups something convenient to change the OGT trainer to me. Margaret, with her thick glasses, looked down apologetically. Mike, who was supposed to train Margaret, didn't seem to like this plain girl. I can just imagine how badly he treated her today. He's always so cold to people he finds useless or doesn't like. "Excuse me," Margaret hesitantly called out to me, and I realized she was there. "You're done for today. Just review what you learned today." "Sure," I said and returned to my desk. I noticed her hands clenched tightly, showing her nervousness and the anxiety of being passed around by seniors. I'll invite her to lunch tomorrow. With that thought, I started planning the training schedule for the next day. But for the next week, sorry, I brought my lunch today. I don't have much of an appetite. My stomach's upset. I'm on a diet. No way, I thought. Has this ever happened? She's turned down every lunch invite this week. During lunch, I slurped my instant noodles and complained to my colleague, who was eating a salad pasta next to me. "She probably doesn't like you." With my colleague's interested response, I became even more confused. No way did I do something. Oh, but my colleague continued. I saw her drinking coffee in the break room yesterday. Didn't seem like she was eating anything, though. I quickly finished the remaining broth in my instant noodles and stood up, carrying a plastic bag. I headed to the break room. On the way, I passed by Jennifer and another female employee from a different department talking. Their casual conversation indicated they were probably new hires from the same cohort, but assigned to different departments. Margaret wore the same clothes this morning again. No way. Isn't that bad? James said. He saw her coming out of a 24-hour cafe this morning. Could she be homeless? I pretended not to notice Jennifer's panicked expression as I passed by. Poor girl. I recall the term I recently learned as I reached my destination. You can't fill up on just coffee. I stood over Margaret, who was sitting in a corner of the break room holding a company-provided coffee cup. Charles, her surprised expression turned gradually awkward as she looked down. I'm sorry for turning down your invitations. I usually don't eat lunch, and I'm not really hungry. As Margaret offered excuses I hadn't asked for, a loud growl from her stomach echoed between us. Here we go. I handed her the plastic bag I brought with spicy kebab from the shop downstairs. You should find at least one you like. Eat up. I pushed the bag closer to Margaret, who looked at it, and me, with a puzzled expression. But I feel bad accepting this. She looked uncertain. Do you plan on sitting next to me all afternoon with your stomach growling? It's distracting. Plus, you can't concentrate if you're hungry. Go on, pick one. Thank you, I'll eat. Margaret took out a rice bowl with pickled plum and quietly thanked me. After work that day, I saw Margaret near the station lockers as I walked by. She seemed to be looking around nervously. Maybe she was being cautious about running into someone she knew, but her suspicious behavior made her stand out even more. When Margaret noticed me, she visibly flinched. I could have ignored her and walked past, but it seemed wrong to disregard someone who reacted so obviously, so I greeted her. How's it going? Hello. When I got closer, I could see her eyes nervously darting behind her thick glasses. Is something wrong? Why are you looking around like that? Oh, my wallet. Your wallet? Yes, I lost my wallet, and I've been looking for it. It sounded like she was grasping for an excuse, but if it was true, it was a big deal. Did you lose it around here? Yeah, I think so. Let me help you look. When I said that, Margaret's eyes widened in surprise, even through her thick lenses. Do you know when you lost it? When did you realize it was gone? When was the last time you took it out around here? Charles, it's okay. You don't need to help me look. Margaret waved her hands frantically in front of her face, clearly flustered by my barrage of questions. But she didn't answer any of them. Then let's go to the police box in front of the south exit and see if anyone turned in a lost wallet. With this final suggestion, Margaret finally gave in. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't lose my wallet. It's in my bag. She apologized repeatedly, her hands clenched tightly. I realized she was in some kind of trouble. Why did you lie? When I asked, Margaret's shoulders jerked. I'm sorry I lied to you. Though her face was downcast, her tearful voice made even me a bit uneasy. Well, let's talk at my place. I tried to keep my voice calm, but suggesting my home might not have been the best idea. However, I live with my sister, so it should be okay. I live with my sister, so don't worry. It's close by, and I can't just leave a crying junior behind. Margaret nodded slightly, and we walked back to my place together. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my sister, who is 3 years younger than me. Our parents divorced when we were young, and we were raised by our mother in a single-parent household. Because our mother was busy with work, my sister and I naturally shared household chores and supported each other from a young age. After graduating high school and moving to New York, my sister followed me and moved into the old apartment I was living in at the time. The apartment was too old and small for both of us, so we moved, but I didn't mind living together. I'm not obsessed with my sister, and she's not obsessed with me. We have a balanced sibling relationship where we don't interfere too much in each other's lives. My sister is still at work and hasn't come home yet. I showed Margaret into the living room and called from the kitchen, "Have a seat." I took a bottle of milk from the fridge, poured it into a mug from the dishwasher, and placed it in front of Margaret, who was sitting timidly on the edge of the sofa. "Here you go." I sat cross-legged on the floor across from her and got to the point. "So, what do you want to talk about?" It might have sounded a bit harsh, but I couldn't think of a better way to ask. "First of all, I'm sorry for lying about losing my wallet." Her immediate apology for lying to a senior showed her sincerity, and I couldn't help but smile a little. "Yeah, I'm not mad about it. You just didn't want me to know what you were doing, right? Do you still not want to tell me?" Gently prodding, Margaret tensed up a bit. After a moment of silence, she started to talk. "I don't have a place to live right now." Margaret explained that she was raised by a single mother, just like me. The difference was that she was an only child. Her mother suddenly passed away last month from a stroke, just before Margaret started her career. In the whirlwind of events, with no time to grieve, the funeral was held, and relatives swarmed her. Even though they talked about various procedures and inheritance matters, young Margaret had no idea what to do. In the end, her mother's sister, her aunt, said, "I'll take care of everything." And Margaret was left out of the loop as everything was settled. When she realized it all, the savings, the house, the car, everything her mother left was taken by her aunt. Without understanding how it happened, she was told, "You're an adult now. You don't need this house," and was kicked out with nowhere to go. As a graduation gift, she was given only $1,000 in cash. April came in a flash, and she started working at the company but still had no place to live, so she's been staying at internet cafes. Earlier, when I saw her at the station lockers, she was trying to get her suitcase. "The inheritance should go to you as her daughter. So why did your aunt get everything?" "There was a will. My mother ran a business, so it wasn't surprising she had prepared one for emergencies. It stated that everything would go to my aunt, who was also a company executive, not me. A female CEO as a mother sounds like a very different environment from what my sister and I experienced," I said. "I'm not well versed in laws or inheritance, but from what I've heard, it sounds like her aunt and the other relatives are shady. Have you thought about talking to the relatives or hiring a lawyer?" "I can't afford a lawyer right now. I don't know how long my savings will last, so I can't spend money on anything but living expenses. I need to find a place to live by this weekend. It's clear that unless Margaret takes action, there's nothing I can do to help her right now." As she spoke with her head down, Margaret continued, "I think my mother really didn't want to leave me anything." Her tone suggested resignation. "I don't believe all parents love their children. My father never paid child support or visited us after the divorce. Maybe he had reasons, maybe not. It doesn't matter. I believe he didn't love us. If Margaret thinks her mother didn't love her, regardless of the reasons, then that's likely the truth for her. There's no need to question it further." But in her voice, I sensed not just resignation, but sadness as well. It was like she was crying without actually shedding tears. I found myself speaking naturally. "Do you want to stay at my place until you find a home? Until you get back on your feet financially?" I was surprised at my own words. Margaret, sitting across from me, had a similar expression of shock. Inviting her over or asking her to stay, I realized I was acting out of character today. I usually don't care much about others. Why was I so concerned about this new hire? Would that really be okay? I thought Margaret would refuse, but her hesitant voice seemed mixed with a bit of joy. Since I made the offer, I couldn't just take it back. "I'll check with my sister, but she's barely home except asleep, so it should be fine." As her brother, it might be odd for me to say, but my sister Patricia is kind. She's competitive and strong-willed, but she loves people and is very helpful. She loves taking care of others. When I messaged my sister to ask if a colleague could stay over for a while, she agreed immediately and replied with, "Okay," and a cute cat sticker, without even asking why. A bit later, she texted, "I'm drinking at a friend's place tonight and won't be back, but you can help yourself to the beer in the fridge." I realized that might be a problem. I had suggested Margaret stay on the premise that my sister would be home, but with her gone, it would just be the two of us. I'm sorry for suggesting it, but since my sister won't be home tonight, would you mind staying at a hotel near the station for tonight? I'll cover the cost. It's not that it's not okay, Margaret said. I understand your sister wouldn't want a stranger in the house. Margaret misinterpreted my hesitation as a rejection, so I corrected her. No, my sister doesn't mind at all, but without her here, it'd just be the two of us. Wouldn't that make you uncomfortable? No, if it's not too much trouble. I feel really bad borrowing money directly, but I'll pay for the utilities once I get my paycheck. Our concerns weren't aligning. I looked at Margaret more closely, wondering how she hadn't faced more danger these past weeks. Her hair was pulled back, and her thick glasses obscured her eyes. She always wore the same boring business suit with her wrinkled shirt buttoned all the way up. Nope, definitely not my type. I knew it was a harsh thought, but it made it easier not to see her as a potential romantic interest. Ensuring nothing inappropriate would happen, I said, "Yeah, it's fine. You can stay from tonight." Margaret sighed in relief and thanked me with a quiet, "Thank you." Over the past week, I've gotten better at reading her emotions through her voice, despite her lack of facial expressions. We decided to retrieve Margaret's luggage from the station locker in the morning, and I pulled a beer from the fridge. It was Friday night. Perfect time to drink. Welcome to our home. We had a simple meal with a beer and some convenience store food from downstairs. I took a shower first and then relaxed on the balcony. Thank you for the shower. Is it really okay to borrow your sister's t-shirt, Charles? Margaret's voice called out when I didn't respond. Oh, the shirt? Yeah, it's fine, I said, looking back outside. I remembered Mike's comment that her facial features weren't bad. Her slightly wavy hair seemed natural. Without her thick glasses, her eyes were surprisingly large and captivating. Wearing my sister's old t-shirt, Margaret's delicate collarbones were visible, giving her a completely different look. For a moment, I was at a loss for words. I might need to reconsider my perception of her as a potential romantic interest. When I glanced at her again, she had put her thick glasses back on, and I felt a slight relief. Why am I relieved? I shrugged off my confusion and headed to the closet to get a futon for guests. I didn't realize my own feelings would keep me up that night. A soft knock woke me up. It was just before 2 a.m. I opened the door to find Margaret standing there instead of sleeping on the sofa. What's wrong? Is it too cold? Do you need an extra blanket? I asked, thinking the light blanket might not be warm enough for an April night. But Margaret shook her head. If she wasn't cold, maybe the sofa was uncomfortable. It folds out into a bed, and my mother has slept on it without issue, and so I waited for her to speak. I couldn't sleep. Can we talk for a bit? Wearing my sister's thin t-shirt, her shoulders looked so small and fragile. She seemed like a scared child seeking comfort from a bad dream, so I invited her into my room. We sat on the edge of my semi-double bed, and she softly apologized. I'm sorry. I sat cross-legged, leaning on my elbow, and looked at Margaret's downcast profile. She wore her thick glasses, unable to see clearly even up close without them. I was struck by the length of her eyelashes, peeking out from behind the lenses. It seemed such a waste for her small face to be hidden behind those large glasses. My mother was always busy with work. Since she started her company in New York when I was in first grade, she became even busier. We only had the minimum necessary conversations. I always got what I needed, including money, so I am grateful, but I often felt that work was her priority and that she raised me just because she had given birth to me. Before I was born, she was working in Italy. She met my father there and got pregnant, which is why she returned to America and had me. I always thought she wanted to stay there and even establish her company in Italy. When she passed away suddenly last month, my aunt told me there was no way she would leave everything to someone like me. Instead of feeling sad, I just accepted it. I thought I must have been a burden to her. As Margaret spoke, her voice grew fainter, and she nervously clasped her hands on her lap. I placed my hand over hers. I don't know what your mom was thinking, but if she really resented you, you wouldn't have grown up this well. Spending money on you is something only a parent's love would compel. I don't know if her mother loved her, but to raise a child properly takes some emotion. Her mother must have had a sense of duty and affection for her. Margaret's eyes behind her thick glasses widened in surprise at my words. Yeah, my mother did think of me as her child. Margaret seemed to be recalling her memories with her mother, her expression a mix of longing, tenderness, and a hint of sadness. It was the first time I'd seen her smile, and it pained me to see that her smile carried such sorrow. Charles, I'm really sorry. I have no close friends because of my personality. My relatives only care about my mother's inheritance. I couldn't ask anyone for help, but being alone, I was scared every day. When you bought me spicy kebab at lunch today and noticed me at the station, I was so happy. Even though I knew it was selfish, I wanted to rely on your kindness. I'm sorry for being just a company junior. Her eyes behind the thick glasses shimmered with tears. I'm the type of person who doesn't do anything I'm not interested in or don't like. I didn't want to leave you alone, so don't apologize and don't think you're a burden. Honestly, I didn't know why I was doing so much for a new hire, but I felt it was the right thing to do. Thank you. Margaret gave a relieved, shy smile, and I smiled back. We chatted about trivial things for a while, and soon Margaret's head began to nod sleepily. Feeling sleepy? I asked, and her nodding stopped abruptly. Sorry, your voice just made me feel so safe. She seemed to be drifting back into sleep, unable to resist the drowsiness. Margaret's words made my heart skip a beat, but she didn't seem to realize it. I kept my composure and gently removed her glasses. You can sleep here. My heart skipped another beat as I saw her eyes again. I couldn't look away from her large, expressive eyes. They were slightly red from the tears and sleepiness. Good night. I covered her eyes with my hand, and she quickly fell asleep. I slowly laid her down on the bed. She likely hadn't slept well since being kicked out of her home, but now she could finally rest deeply. I'd let her sleep here tonight. I gently stroked her soft hair and lay down beside her. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, Margaret's face was right in front of me. What? I jumped up in surprise. Charles, good morning. Wait a minute, didn't I sleep on the sofa last night? Why is Margaret here? I woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep, so I came to your side and fell asleep. Come on, that's bad for my heart. Can I make breakfast? Just as I was beginning to understand my feelings, Margaret, still a bit groggy, suddenly made the suggestion. What? Breakfast. Yeah, I'm pretty good at cooking, so if it's all right, I'd like to make meals while I stay here using what was in the fridge. Margaret made omelette rice. This is delicious. I expressed my honest opinion. Margaret, who had been watching anxiously, smiled with relief and said, I'm glad. It seemed like Margaret was more expressive today, maybe because she felt much safer with me after yesterday. This omelette is really to my liking. I finished it in no time. If it's not too much trouble, would you like me to make you lunch for work? Charles, you always eat junk food or unhealthy food, right? Really? I can give you money for lunch. At that moment, I heard keys jangling at the door, followed by it opening, and my sister's casual voice calling out. I'm home. She walked into the living room and saw Margaret sitting across from me, her mouth dropping open in surprise. What? You're letting someone stay, and it's a girl? I thought it was a guy. Margaret shrank back, apologizing timidly. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? It's all good. I wasn't here yesterday. Was it okay being alone with my brother? He didn't do anything weird. Did he? Wait, are you two dating? No way. You're too cute for him. Can you be quiet for a second? Seeing Margaret overwhelmed by my overly talkative sister, I intervened. My sister shrugged sheepishly, and I sighed, properly introducing Margaret. After hearing about Margaret's situation, my sister got angry on her behalf. What's up with that, aunt? You should get a lawyer. I know one from the bar I go to. I quickly stopped my sister before she could get too involved and introduced Margaret to her. This is my sister, Patricia. As you can see, she's noisy and annoying, so don't feel like you have to be polite. You're one to talk. Shut up, big mouth. You shut up. Our introduction turned into the usual sibling squabble, making Margaret giggle. Seeing this, Patricia beamed. She's so cute. She can stay here as long as she wants. Is that really all your stuff? What about your regular clothes? You can borrow mine until you get your own. Patricia pulled Margaret by the hand into her room. You can wash the dishes, she added, implying I should stay out a while later. Patricia emerged with Margaret. Margaret was now wearing a light green dress with a matching jacket. It was office casual but made of soft material and had a relaxed design. Her hair was loosely styled, her glasses were off, and she had light makeup, making her look a bit more mature than usual. You look beautiful. It really suits you, I said. When I said that, Margaret blushed. Right. I fell in love with this outfit at first sight, but it didn't quite suit me. It looks perfect on Margaret. You can have it. Already? I asked. Calling Margaret by a nickname, she declared happily. I haven't seen myself yet because I don't have my glasses, and it looks expensive. I can't accept it. It's fine. Clothes are happier being worn by someone they suit, rather than someone they don't, Margaret replied. You couldn't fit into it, I said. Could you shut up? I muted. My sister snapped at me. I hit the mark. She probably bought it without trying it on because it looked cute. This brand has a mix of elegance and cuteness, which I think suits you perfectly, Margaret. How about we go to the store together next time? It's called Sono, a sister brand of font that launched last year. Font? Yeah, don't you know it? It's quite a famous brand. Even I, home not into fashion, had heard of Font, a well-known domestic brand. Hearing that name, Margaret was visibly shaken. This is my mother's brand, she softly spoke, surprising both me and my sister. Margaret's mother was the designer and CEO of the brand. The designer of Font was named Barbara Williams. I was astonished to realize that the daughter of the famous Barbara Williams was Margaret Williams. Anyone else would have boasted about it, but Margaret just looked down, keeping her thoughts to herself. From what she had told us yesterday, thinking about her mother's brand might be too painful for her. Seeing this, Patricia, who had been buzzing with energy moments ago, spoke quietly. Font is a high-end brand for people in their 30s and 40s, stylish and quite expensive. But the Sono line, launched last year, is more affordable and targeted at people in their 20s. Margaret, do you know what Sono means in Italian? Margaret shook her head. It means dream, Patricia said. Margaret's head snapped up. Maybe your mother designed it with you in mind, imagining you wearing it as a young professional. She launched the brand just as you were starting your career, and it looks perfect on you. I looked up the Sono brand website on my phone. The clothes featured there seemed designed specifically for Margaret, as if made for her by her mother. Font designer Barbara Williams created a new brand for young adults, clothes to wear while holding onto your precious dream. The description hinted at Barbara Williams creating this brand with her beloved daughter in mind. No way. Mom. Tears fell from Margaret's eyes. Barbara Williams, the world-renowned designer, clearly had deep love for her daughter Margaret. I didn't know anything about the brand. I assumed my mom didn't want to know me, so I didn't try to know her. I'm sorry, she repeated, apologizing to her mother, who could no longer hear her. I gently embraced Margaret as she cried. Patricia looked a bit surprised, but quickly nodded at me and left the room. Patricia has good instincts. She probably sensed my feelings from my unusual behavior. She might also be giving Margaret privacy to cry without being seen. As we sat alone in the room, I spoke softly to Margaret while she continued to cry in my arms. You can't keep regretting the past. It will only hold you back. What you can do now is honor your mother's wishes. She wanted you to embrace your dreams. Your mother wanted you to live with hope for the future. Dreams? Margaret asked. Yes. These might just be comforting words. I don't truly know what Barbara Williams was thinking, but is it wrong for those left behind to seek some solace? It might seem out of character, but I want Margaret to look forward and move on. I want her to lift her head and smile with those beautiful eyes, so I'll say whatever it takes. When Margaret finally lifted her head, her eyes were still wet with tears, but the sorrow clouding them seemed to have lifted. I want to be someone who can proudly wear my mother's clothes. She smiled through her tears, sharing her new dream. The following week, when Margaret came into the office, everyone was stunned. Her wavy hair was down, she wore natural makeup, and the thick glasses that had become her trademark were gone. She wore a trendy pantsuit borrowed from Patricia. The transformation from the somewhat rural and increasingly unkempt appearance she had until last week was striking, naturally drawing everyone's attention. Most notably, everyone finally noticed her beautiful face, particularly her captivating eyes that had been hidden before. "Margaret, what happened? A makeover?" her colleague James asked, looking flustered. "Yeah, does it look strange?" Margaret looked up at James with a worried expression, her natural gaze upwards making her even more endearing. James blushed slightly. "No, it looks great on you. It's not strange at all. As expected from the Margaret I'm mentoring. It suits you perfectly." "Of course it does." I felt oddly proud when Margaret received compliments. Starting this week, our company is holding a product planning competition open to all employees. In reality, it's more of a contest for the new hires, with only one outstanding idea being chosen for actual product development. Naturally, all the new employees in the planning department are participating. Margaret was extremely eager about this, working diligently on her proposal. During her breaks, she spent her lunch breaks alone in the refresh room, researching and brainstorming. Margaret, who had always been a quick learner, gradually became more confident at work, and her colleagues started to take notice. Finally, the competition results were announced, and Margaret's proposal was chosen for this year's product development. The theme was enjoying moments together with your family. The idea was for 2 cameras to automatically share the photos they each took, even if physically apart. Parents could see what their children were experiencing through the photos. The children's camera would have additional features like GPS. Although it was still a rough concept, the proposal would be refined through further meetings. Margaret was selected as the leader of this project, with me as her assistant, James, and Jennifer. Our peers initially felt confused and jealous when Margaret, whom they had unconsciously looked down upon, suddenly transformed and rose in esteem to become project leader. However, just before the planning meeting, when Margaret, looking tense, asked them for help, their resentment seemed to dissipate. "We're all in this together. Let's do our best," they said. "Yeah, this is a great opportunity that Margaret earned. Let's make it a success together," they added. Seeing James and Jennifer look pleased with being relied on, and Margaret's smile made me feel relieved. But Margaret also caught the attention of the most troublesome person. "Margaret, congratulations on winning the competition. That's amazing. Maybe it's because of how well I taught you," Mike said, smiling kindly at Margaret. He was referring to the one day he taught her at the beginning. After behaving like that, what could he have possibly taught her? "Yes, I think I've managed so far thanks to Charles. He's really helped me a lot," Margaret said. A bit naive, she didn't catch Mike's implied meaning and honestly expressed her gratitude to me. "No, not Charles. Don't you feel uneasy with him? You should switch to me for this project. It'll go even better. How about we discuss it over dinner? How about some delicious teppanyaki?" Mike's intentions were clear, and I was about to step in when Margaret responded. "Thank you, but Charles is a very reliable mentor to me. This project wouldn't be the same without him, so I'm not considering changing assistants. And I can't go to dinner. I've already prepared tonight's meal. Sorry." Margaret turned away. She probably didn't even realize Mike's ulterior motives, which made me smile. After work that day, after finishing Margaret's special dinner of steak, I told Margaret and Patricia that I was stepping out for a bit. "Take care," they replied, their growing friendship making them seem like sisters. At home, Patricia seemed to talk to Margaret more than I did. About 20 minutes from home, I arrived at the company again. It was just before 9:00 p.m. "Mike, good evening," I said. Mike, surprised to see me waiting at the entrance, hesitated. "Charles, what are you doing here? You should have left a long time ago. What were you doing at the office so late when no one else was around?" he asked. I lowered my voice as I questioned him. "Work, obviously. Don't ask stupid questions. Unlike you, I'm busy accessing Margaret's PC." Why would I access her PC? That's ridiculous, Mike replied. I set Margaret's PC to notify me whenever a specific app is opened. The app with the project data. You activate it after 8:00 p.m. I bet you waited until everyone left the office to delete Margaret's project data. It's pointless though. The data is backed up on my PC. Even if the data is gone, you have no proof it was me, Mike said. I couldn't believe Mike was resorting to such pathetic excuses. The camera activates with the app. You should have expected that. My words silenced Mike. I always thought you were a competent and amusing guy, Mike. Even when you gave me a hard time or dumped work on me, you'd never actually sabotaged my work. You knew how to draw the line. But this is low. Mike's hands clenched tightly. You don't get it. You, a high school graduate, managed to score a top position in sales and performed brilliantly. I know you were demoted. You were transferred based on an IQ test. You've been highly regarded everywhere, while I've been working hard and still remain below you, always so composed. 3 years ago, the company introduced an IQ test. My results showed I had a high IQ, which, along with other aptitude tests, led to my transfer from sales to planning. Sure, I know I'm efficient and quick to grasp things, but this efficiency also led to arrogance. I began to think I could do things better and faster alone. The sales department had a lot of one-man shows. Among them, I stood out, not just a little, but a lot. Over time, I began to find my work boring. Looking back, it's no surprise my attitude made me unpopular. Then came the IQ and aptitude tests. Initially, after being transferred, I found the planning work dull. But as I talked and consulted with my colleagues, I started to enjoy creating projects together. Mike seemed jealous of me, but I'm far from perfect. What's the point of a high IQ if I couldn't find meaning in my work alone? It's fine to be jealous and make snide remarks to me. Your efforts have probably surpassed mine already, so compete with me fair and square. But if you mess with anyone else, especially Margaret, I won't forgive you. Mike stayed silent, looking down. From the next day, we both acted like nothing had happened. At first, Mike seemed cautious, but when I asked, Mike, can I use your previous data as a reference? He slowly returned to his usual self, reluctantly helping with Margaret's project. 4 months have passed since Margaret's project started. The product, which our entire department worked together on through trial and error, successfully launched and gained more traction than expected. Thanks to effective social media promotion, it was a huge success. On the day of the product launch, Margaret wore clothes from her mother's brand, Sono. She stood proudly, representing the brand's concept, perfectly embodying the spirit of chasing dreams. That night, Patricia's overly enthusiastic toast kicked off the celebration party for me, Margaret, and my sister. Summer had passed, and the cool night breeze signaled September. Margaret is still living with my sister and me in our apartment. Despite Margaret's numerous attempts to move out, Patricia and I had always found reasons to make her stay. Somewhere along the way, we started relying on her presence. Yet the thought that she might leave, if given the chance, always worried me, especially since she seemed oblivious to my feelings. I have one more announcement to make, Margaret suddenly said, causing me to tense up a bit. Actually, I received a call from the lawyer who handled my mother's estate. Margaret began. According to the lawyer, Margaret's mother had indeed created a will regarding her inheritance before she passed. However, the contents were entirely different from what her aunt had claimed. The will clearly stated that all of her mother's assets were to be inherited by her only daughter. Exploiting Margaret's lack of knowledge and her vulnerable state after losing her only family, her aunt and other relatives had kept her from contacting the lawyer and had taken everything for themselves. But living with us for the past few months had given Margaret the stability to hire Patricia's lawyer friend, who managed to reverse the illegal inheritance process. Consequently, the inheritance was returned to Margaret, making her the rightful heir. Though her aunt had initially resisted, she eventually agreed to return everything to Margaret in exchange for continuing to manage the brand. The aunt, who had helped build the brand with Margaret's mother, likely wanted to avoid a court battle that could tarnish the brand's reputation. Honestly, I didn't care about the inheritance or the money. Just knowing my mother's true intentions was enough. Realizing that she had done so much for me made me really happy, Margaret said, tears welling up in her eyes. I gently patted Margaret's head, a comforting gesture. The atmosphere grew somber for a moment, but Margaret broke the silence. I really appreciate all you've done for me, but I think it's time I moved out next month. My hand on Margaret's head froze in place. Margaret, what do you think of me? Well, I respect you, Charles. You're good at your job, and you're kind. I'm very grateful for that. But, it's a bit embarrassing when you're too close to me at work. So could you stop that? That's not what I wanted to hear, and to be honest, it stung a little that she found it embarrassing. But I shook my head determined. Margaret, listen. I like you. I want you to stay with me. Don't leave. I felt like my confession was plain and unremarkable, but right now all I cared about was making her understand how I felt. I'm happy. I never imagined that you would like me, Charles. I'd always thought you saw me as a little sister. It hurt a bit to realize she had never noticed my feelings before, but her reaction gave me hope. Margaret, can I hear your answer? She blushed and nodded. I like you too, Charles. We looked into each other's eyes. Sorry to interrupt your happy ending, but don't forget about me. Patricia's voice wasn't sorry at all, and her reminder jolted me back to reality. I was so caught up that I had genuinely forgotten she was there, smiling broadly, clearly enjoying herself. My brother found someone he cares about more than the ribbon girl, Patricia teased. Ribbon girl? Margaret asked. Don't bring that up, I snapped at my sister. The last thing I wanted was for Margaret to get the wrong idea. At this moment, I turned to her and began explaining about the ribbon girl. It all started when I was in 6th grade. My sister and I used to go to after-school care, where we met a girl. She always wore cute clothes and had beautiful eyes. I never knew her name or grade, but she seemed younger than us. She always stayed at the after-school care until the end. Our mother picked us up late, so we often stayed late too, but she was always there, even later. We didn't spend much time together, maybe only a handful of times, but in those few times, she grew quite attached to me. One day, her mother came to pick her up earlier than our mom, which was rare. The mother talked with the after-school care teacher for a while and then called out to her daughter to go home. Usually when we left, the girl would give us a cute smile and say, "See you." But this time she clung to my clothes and cried, saying no for the first time. Confused, I looked at her mother, who said, "So you're the cool big brother who's been playing with my daughter. Thank you for being so kind to her. This might not seem valuable to a boy, but it will mean something someday, so hold on to it until you grow up." She handed me a charm with a ribbon on it. I vaguely remember that the woman was incredibly confident and beautiful. The girl, still crying, waved goodbye as her mother took her away. After that day, the girl never returned to the after-school care. Honestly, my memories of her are quite blurry, but the way she clung to me was just so adorable to me. She became the ribbon girl, my first crush. By the way, here's the ribbon from back then, Patricia said, having fetched the charm from my room and holding it up triumphantly. Hey, cut it out, I said, really wishing she'd stop. I didn't want Margaret to know that I'd held on to something from my first crush all these years, thinking it might seem overly sentimental or childish. I covered my face with my hands. That ribbon, it's my mom's, Margaret said, staring intently at the ribbon. Suddenly she exclaimed, "Look, this mark. It was engraved on the accessories from the early days of my mom's brand." She was explaining excitedly, her voice high-pitched with joy at finding something from her mother's brand. Wait, so if that's from Margaret's mom's brand, does that mean the ribbon girl my brother couldn't forget is Margaret? What? Margaret blinked in surprise at our astonished voices. She suddenly raised her voice in shock as well. When I was in 1st grade, there was this really kind old boy I looked up to, but I moved away soon after. Is that older boy really Charles? Margaret's eyes, glistening with happiness, peeked out from behind her hands covering her mouth. This is amazing. Am I not the MVP here? This is fate for sure. Patricia, more excited than anyone, suddenly stood up with a determined expression. I'm staying at my boyfriend's place tonight. No time to waste, she said as she quickly got ready and left the house, chatting on the phone with her boyfriend. She even gave me a thumbs up and a wink on her way out. My sister sure knows how to be considerate, I said. Margaret and I watched in amazement as she departed like a whirlwind. After a moment, we looked at each other, touched our foreheads together, and laughed softly. Then we gazed into each other's eyes, slowly intertwining our fingers and closed our eyes. People live by being thought of, thinking of others, supporting and being supported. I want to live feeling the joy of sharing life with her,